Leaving the hospital, the daughter looked up, and there she was, small but recognizable, the size of a fist held up to the sky. At least from this distance, that's how small she appeared. It's like when some feet behind a person, you can crush him with only your thumb and pointer. Perspective. The daughter knew it was her mother because she hovered mute, refusing to speak first. The daughter is also a stubborn woman, so she said nothing. She zipped her coat and pretended not to see her. Later, in her living room, she pulled the curtain back and glanced, as if noting the weather. It seemed her mother had grown slightly. The speck of her no longer fit under a hand. "Are you okay?" her neighbor asked. He is a good man. "Are you going to cry or scream? I'll leave the room." "Bill," she said, "can I borrow your binoculars?" I can't say how she knew Bill owned binoculars. She had a feeling, even though he didn't seem like a bird watcher. When he left to get these binoculars, she imagined him pulling a velvet-lined case from a kitchen cabinet or under his bed. She had not seen Bill's bed, but his kitchen was like hers, all 70s orange and fake dark wood. He was back with the binoculars fast enough to have known where they were. She told him to look in the sky. Did he notice anything weird? Bill shook his head. "Well," he said, "I don't see any birds." After Bill left, the daughter took the binoculars out to her yard and pointed them at the mother. Her mother's hair was longer than she remembered it at any time in her life. It hugged her upper body, gray and seal sleek. The flaps of her green hospital gown rose around her like wings. The gown's loose strings trailed behind her like kite tails. And then, do you know what she did, the mother? She flipped the daughter off. Her mouth opened and closed, but the sound was lost. The daughter put down the binoculars and went back inside, slamming the front door behind her. For an hour, she slept with a quilt pulled over her head, covered with pillows. It was like the aftermath of every fight she'd had with the mother from 6th grade through college. She didn't wake up until Bill called. "Is it the planes?" he asked. "I used to fear planes falling, too. In my yard, through the roof." "No," the daughter said. "I trust planes. It's my mother." "Oh," he said. "She's dead." She told him it was okay, we would all be okay, and she crawled back under the pillows. It was starting to get dark. There would be car lights through the windows soon, and she tried to fall asleep again, worrying a little about her mother. Was she cold? Could she sleep? The mother's funeral was 3 days later. By then, she had bloomed like a kernel of corn, popped. Her edges were more defined, and the daughter could almost see her face without the binoculars, or maybe she couldn't help imagining it. Her place in the sky was fixed, not quite straight overhead. The daughter looked at her once when the sun got close, and the mother's mouth opened and closed, but she didn't flip the daughter off. Bill went with the daughter to pick up her mother's ashes, which were packed neatly in a short black urn. The mother had wanted a stone, a burial, but she didn't want a coffin or a body. "I want to leave my body," she told the daughter once. Isn't that the whole point? So it was the daughter and Bill and several members of the mother's church, all standing around this empty hole in the ground, listening to the pastor's slow and even voice. When it was time for the daughter to pour her ashes over the dirt, she knelt and spooned them out instead. She was determined to be proper. She was determined not to make a mess. The daughter smoothed and shaped the ash into a small mound of her mother, only a speck seen from above. She didn't look up until the weeping was far behind her and Bill had gone back home. She thought her mother would be gone from the sky, having approved of the afternoon, but she was there in the same position. The mother was larger and had somehow managed to tie her gown. "Fine," the daughter said, "then what was the point of the urn?" Maybe that was not the right thing to ask. Maybe she should have been more worried about why her mother hung in the sky like a cloud, growing larger and larger every day, or closer and closer. But this mother is not like your mother. Although the daughter could not hear the words that left the mother's mouth, I knew they must be this: Wait until your father gets home. Just wait. When her doorbell rang later that night, the daughter figured it was Bill, who said he'd be by to check on her and pick up his binoculars since she didn't need them anymore. Instead, it was her father, who had disappeared 10 years before, leaving the daughter and her mother alone with each other. He hugged her with arms of white feathers, and she felt his tiny talons, 8 dots of cold on her back. "How are you?" she said. "Fine, fine," her father said, his voice as soft as ever. He wore dark gray pants and leather shoes. The skin on his face was pale and creased, as if someone had traced lines around his features. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. "Well," her father said, and cleared his throat. "Mom?" the daughter asked. "Well," her father said again. "You've seen her then?" "Yes, you've seen her. She thinks she's stuck because of you." "Motherly love," the daughter said. "Power of attachment." "That's not why I'm here. You should know I remarried, hence the wings," her father said, and tried to flutter. "Juniper, that's her name, wanted my arms. The sacrifices don't end. I think you should know that. And we have this favor we need from you, Juniper and I." Her father went on and on about Juniper, her girlish figure, her feathery face. In 10 years, he had become a new man. In 10 years, he had forgotten about the mother. He had married a bird. The daughter knew they had fought often during their marriage over little things like which brand of ice cream should enter the house, and big things like why they had married in the first place. But the years since her father left, it seemed the mother had missed him anyway, and the daughter had missed him too. It's like when you close one eye and everything to the side of that eye is lost. You only see what's in front of you, and when you're old, your vision is worse still. And that thing in front of you might look like your husband, and that feeling you might have might be love. By the time the father stood to leave, the daughter was angry, though he couldn't see it. "I am happy," he said. "Finally, I can say that I am happy." He moved to hug her, and this time all she felt was herself folded into wings. She put on her coat and walked outside to see if she could find her mother. She could only pick out part of her, the moon glinting off the mother's hair in the dark. What her father had asked her to do was illegal, but she did it anyway. Juniper was baby crazy, her father said, and her demands were starting to drive him crazy too. But he loved her. Juniper prayed all the time for a son with boy arms and a tail of feathers. So he asked around, and the thing that's stopping them? It's the mother. What the daughter had to do was move her, all ashes and bone, to a special box lined with Juniper's down and locked with her father's ring. Then the mother would be gone. This is one of those moments when you have to decide. Do you love your mother or your father more? And you had better be sure. The daughter called Bill and asked to borrow a shovel. He carried over a heavy green one he'd bought on sale at the hardware store. "Can I be of any help?" he asked the daughter, so polite. "No," she said. "But if this works, I'll make you dinner." Bill had never seen her eat, but he liked to think she did so without pretense, sometimes even foregoing silverware. But he kept this to himself. He stood at the end of their street in the dark and watched the red lights of the daughter's car until they were almost as small as pimientos. At the cemetery, the daughter dug and dug until her arms hurt and her back ached. The ground was not firm, but the daughter was weak. The smell of turned earth got in her hair and her skin. All this time she did not look at her mother, but she felt her mouth opening and closing. The pieces of the mother's bone were the same color as Juniper's down. The daughter scooped up the dirt and ash and bone and put it in the box her father had given her. The box was the size of a child's lunch pail and made of wood. She closed the empty hole in the ground, wiped her hands, and locked the box with her father's ring. The sky was black and starred, emptied of clouds and mothers. This is how it went for the daughter, who drove home to the sounds of her mother's mouth opening and closing inside the box, her crying and clawing at the down like a hungry cat. You may never know how much you love your mother until you hold her in your hands inside a box. The daughter put the box in the kitchen cabinet she rarely opened, the one with half-eaten boxes of cereal and cans of tomato sauce. In the morning, Bill came to get his shovel. "You've got mice," he said. "Can't you hear them scratching in your cupboard?" "I hadn't noticed," the daughter said, and started to cry. Because Bill had never seen her lose it like that, he left to go look for rat poison in his garage. But instead of poison, he found a shoebox and sat on the cold concrete floor looking through pictures of his dead wife with her lovely small mouth and missing her. Neighbors aren't always there when you need them. In fact, most people wish they could go back to their own homes and nail their windows shut one by one. The father had been one of these people. The daughter washed her face in the bathroom and then stood with her ear to the fake wood cabinet, listening for her mother's scratches. But everything was quiet. Why she did not feel Juniper there, sitting at the kitchen table behind her, I'm not sure. It was the tapping she noticed next, a slow thing like the start of sleet on glass. Next, she saw the egg, then Juniper with the egg in her hands. Though actually they were her father's hands given to Juniper, and they sprouted from the feathers of her brown breast, small stumps where her wings should be. Everything else about her was bird, except her mouth, which was human, and an ugly mouth, dark like her eyes. "I prayed for this son many months before your mother died," Juniper said. She lowered her head and brought the egg to her lips, murmuring chirps before looking at the daughter again. "He'll be your little brother. Your father and I have some readying to do in case he is born with wings, God forbid. I was going to leave him with a friend, but your father said you'd like to watch him since you don't have a child of your own, poor thing. Keep him warm. Your father will pick him up tomorrow." Juniper raised the father's hand and put it on the daughter's shoulder. It perched there for a moment, clammy and still, and then the other hand gave her the egg, which tapped 3 times and was quiet. The daughter stood, hands cupped, and watched Juniper's skinny bird legs leave through her front door. The egg was white and speckled with silver. It was hot in her hands, the size of a walnut. For such a tiny egg, it was heavy in her hands. It weighed as much as a pair of binoculars. The daughter did not feel right holding the egg, so she set it in a dish on the table. The mother started scratching inside the cabinet again, this time wailing. Finally, the daughter opened the cabinet and pushed the boxes of cereal aside. She carried her mother's box to the living room and held it in her lap, rocking it. The scratching did not stop. The wailing did not stop. So the daughter borrowed an axe and broke the ring and opened the box. Her mother lay inside, curled around her own thin knees. "Mother, are you cold?" the daughter asked. "Yes," the mother said. So the daughter cut a square from her scarf and wrapped her mother in it. "Mother, are you hungry?" the daughter asked. "Yes," the mother said. So the daughter left her mother there, covered in the box, and went back to the kitchen. She opened the fridge and found nothing but pickles and butter. She opened the cabinets and found nothing but cans and crackers. "What will I feed my mother?" she worried. Her mother began to wail again, and the daughter sat at the table with her head in her hands. Then she heard a faint tap, 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 and remembered the egg in the dish. She held it between 2 fingers and found it had already begun to cool. The daughter set the egg back in the dish and turned on the stove. She put some butter in a pan and waited as it spread and hissed, and then she picked up the egg, which had not tapped again for all this time. Again she thought how heavy this little egg turned out to be. The daughter crushed the egg between her fingers and let it slip into the pan. She watched the liquid go from clear to white, searching a little for her brother in the center, looking, she realized, for the beginning of wings or her father's arms. While the egg finished cooking, the daughter gathered the thin shards of shell and carried them outside. She scooped up grass and dirt and buried the white and silver coat of her brother under the evergreen tree in her yard. In the kitchen, she scraped the egg from the pan and peppered it. She helped her mother sit and fed her bits of egg from her finger. "Daughter," the mother said, "this food is delicious." The daughter felt better and waited as her mother chewed and swallowed. She ate the entire egg, and wanted to lie down again. The daughter wrapped her mother in the scarf and shut the lid of the box. She drove to the cemetery with her mother in the passenger seat, taking care at curves and stop signs. "Mother, are you tired?" the daughter asked. "Yes," the mother said. So once again the daughter dug and dug, but her arms were not sore and her back did not ache. She lifted her mother out of the box and cradled her in her hands, singing so quietly I could not hear the words. Because I am not one whose voice is given to song, I can never capture the rise and fall of the melody the way I remember it. I can't help but think, if only I could repeat the words. If only I could say, "Lean closer," and watch my lips, and maybe you and I can understand, finally, what is love.